Hello and welcome to the Genius Move Audio Academy podcast. My name is Paul Brewer. In this podcast, I'll chat to people who are professionally involved in the music business both here in Ireland and abroad. If you're listening to this, perhaps you have an interest in learning. Please visit geniusmove.ie, check my courses or book a one-to-one teaching session. Today's guest is Nialler9. You may know him from the Nialler9 website. Perhaps you go there for new music news, gig recommendations, and his weekly podcast, which is up to episode 226. He has worked in print media such as the Irish Times, had his own radio show, and occasionally features on TV. Recently, we sat down for a chat over the internet. The reason why I wanted to interview you was because within the music scene, you do your own thing. Nobody else does what you do. Is that a fair statement?
I guess there's loads of people who do the individual parts of what I do, but I guess I do my own thing out of necessity.
Yeah.
And also because of interest, yeah, sure.
What's your background then?
My background originally, in terms of college and everything.
Well, how did you end up at this point, sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, college is relevant to it as well because I did multimedia programming, so I learned how to build websites. So I ended up combining my love of music with publishing online, really. And that came from learning how to do it in college and all that kind of stuff, and discovering WordPress and all that stuff from a very early time, I guess, because 2005 was when I started doing the website. So
really? Wow.
Yeah, so I originally started the website as actually a portfolio for my web work, and then I got a job, and then I was like, at the time paying for a domain and hosting was quite expensive, so I was like, and I was just out of being a student, so I was like, well, what'll I do with this website that I'm spending money on? So I put a blog on it as well as the portfolio for the first year and a half, 2 years, and then quickly got rid of the portfolio after that as it started to grow. I just think I started at the right time. There was a good community of people who were writing Irish blogs and who were very encouraging to me. People like Sinead Gleeson would be one I can think of who was very encouraging to me at the time, and that's something when somebody is a working journalist, and you're like, wow, okay, maybe I should keep at this. And then there was a nice community around it. So it's a long time later, and I'm still doing it. 18 years now.
How many bands have come and gone since 18 years?
I know. I don't want to think about that. Really, that's the hard thing, isn't it?
Really, it was that early start made you sort of head of the posse, as it were. And the combination of having the technical thing and the writing thing.
Yeah, and I think because, I was able to brand the website and stuff because I had the design skills at the time that maybe other people didn't have, and they were just taking a theme off a shelf, and I was able to very much keep like those colours that I have even now to this day, the kind of blue and the kind of pink or violet. They've been there since day one, and in various iterations, in various formats, and they still exist now, and the logo and all that kind of stuff. I think at that time people were more focused on just the writing stuff, but I always loved the taxonomy of it all, the like figuring out categorizations and how to present it, and then later on when search engine optimization became a bigger thing, like using that in your daily work. And so really you're learning the skills of a modern publisher, I was anyway, as we move through those years and kind of go, well, what makes sense, how to write headlines, how to write engaging articles and copy and all that stuff. So yeah, and it's still something you're always learning, because now, with social media stuff, you really have to, like, the website is still the number one for me, and I want people to visit that first, but you have to do so much around it now just to get people in there, because all the social media platforms obviously want you to stay on their platform. So getting engagement beyond the social media platforms is difficult. It is difficult. It is a constant battle to get people to revisit and come back all the time. And, you could do things in terms of building mailing lists and trying to do more video and all this kind of stuff, but it's really just down to trying to maintain your I guess your trusted source and your authority in what you do. So that's what I try and do, maintain that as much as possible. And so for example, while I have sponsorship and ads on the website, none of it can ever cross over into editorial in terms of new music features or anything like that. No one can pay for a feature in terms of new artists or major label artists or anything like that. Now we can talk about doing stuff around gigs and events and stuff like that with brands and things like that, but they're very clearly marked and everything like that. So yeah, that's how to operate. I think it's the only way people will still trust you and continue to trust you if you are just open and as transparent as you can and maintain. For me, it's about the music first, and that's what it's always going to be. So I try and just keep that as number one consideration for everything else. But yeah, all this other stuff around it now is occupies a lot more of your time sometimes.
In terms of your audience, is it a particular demographic? Is it a particular age group? Is it or do you know, or do you care?
I mean, I do look, but I don't look at it every day or anything. It's a hard thing to look. But I mean, they're all basically late 20s, early 30s kind of is the main demographic, and it has been for a long time. But I'm getting older obviously as well, so it moves as well. So I think that's the constant challenge as well, trying to, there's kids starting college now this week and or last week, and you're like, well, where are they going for their new music? Where are they going for gig guides and stuff like that? I'd hope that some of them come to Nialler9, but there's no guarantee that's going to continue happening. So it's you have to change and evolve all the time and try and bring new people in and show that you're a reputable source of information and a recommendation as well. So that's the thing. Just keep at it, trying to keep at it and just convince people that's what's happening.
Are you the new Hot Press? Do you remember Hot Press when it started?
I'm around too long to be called the new Hot Press, really. I think we're different. I mean, Hot Press is very old school, and it's still rooted in its magazine and still rooted in its old ways in a way. I'm a single person these days. I mean, before the pandemic, there was more of us in an office in town, but the pandemic made everything kind of fall out of things. So I went back to being just working for myself and working on my things, largely just me, with the exception of podcast co-host Andrea and a few people who contribute here and there. But mostly it's the daily stuff is me. That can be tough as well, I think, to maintain that. But I think I do a lot for one person. And I think a lot of people are surprised that it's one person when artists are contacting me and stuff like that. And you're like, there was a team and now there's not a team, and people are like, I still get emails from people who think it's loads of people, and you're like, actually it's just me, because sometimes you have to tell people that.
How many people were working there?
There was 3 of us in the office before the pandemic. The cost of everything made it very difficult. I think it was viable, but it's also more stressful to run a small scale business and to try and keep the requisite revenue coming in so that you can pay for everything. And I kind of decided when things came back, I mean, they left the country as well. And in fairness, the people that I was working with, young people, Kelly and Luke Sharkey and Kelly Doherty, I mean, they're working elsewhere now, but these people the young people can't stay in this country anymore. They can't afford to stay in this country, and I can't afford to pay them enough of a wage to keep them here, So it's small margins, and that's how it works. And that's like anyone. It's majorly sponsorship supported, reader supported through Patreon. Those things are invaluable. Couldn't do it otherwise, really. So yeah, I think it's just I'm in a place now, I think, where I can manage the workload week by week, but it's trying to do it as smart as you can, I think.
Right. How many hours a week are you putting into it?
I mean, I'm working 9 to 5, 9 to 6, 5 days a week. Wow. Pretty much.
Do you have time to go to gigs and stuff?
I mean, I probably go to less gigs now than I did 4 or 5 years ago, but I'm also 40 now, so I don't really want to go to as many gigs all the time. And I still DJ at Lumo. We have our club on Saturday, and I manage a band called Skinner. So there are other things that I'm involved in, but generally the website is the main thing and whatever comes off that. So it just means I can devote the time there to doing that and doing the podcast and stuff as well. So that means those things are important to me. Like the podcast is one of those things that I love doing, and I think the readers and listeners really enjoy. But if you were to take it on its pure, like it doesn't bring in revenue much on its own, but it's part of the overall package, you know. So now I also have like through the Patreon and stuff, there's a Discord community of people who about 120 people who signed up to that, over maybe 140 now, but I don't know how many people are active. But there's a nice community of people who actually are talking to each other about music on a pretty regular basis. And we've had a couple of meetups and stuff like that. So that's been really nice because I think community is something that is, in terms of online communities, is missing now around music. So that's been really nice to do and very encouraging, and just shows me, you know, I mean, I think there's a lot of respect out there for what I do, I hope, but also it's very much a case of you just have to keep at it. You're only as good as your last week, really, in lots of ways, you know. Um, it's interesting. I think the like music discovery is what I'd rather be doing most of the time, but through the necessities of what is required and how the landscape changes around you, you can't just focus on listening to music all the time and then writing about music bands that you like that no one's ever heard of. You have to balance that with news items and stuff like that bring in traffic and covering things of a greater magnitude or more popular that are still fit your purview and still fit your world, but also you know, you need to balance the act of, like, when I started it was just here's music that I like and here's some new discoveries. All that stuff now is fractured in lots of ways. I do two big kind of music tracks a week in terms of Irish tracks of the week, and then Fridays like new music stuff. I probably, like, in the traditional sense, if you're talking about hot press, like I probably, like, they do album reviews and features and interviews. It's really hard to find the time to do all those, and one person can't really. So I don't do album reviews anymore because people, to be honest, weren't reading them, and that's just it's for the time you put in, you have to put the time and resources and figure out if it's worth your while, and most of the time it's not. And so it's worth.
What is an album to a 20-year-old these days, anyway?
Well, that's it. Yeah, I mean, like, the discourse around it is usually more interesting a lot of time than. I mean, I still love reading album reviews, but it just comes down to resources and time, and I haven't got the time to do those things because the return in terms of eyeballs isn't enough to justify it, and so you have to find a way of doing it smarter and or picking out bits and pieces, and so there are constantly things you're looking at in terms of, well, what's the best what use of my time today. There are regular things like the gig guide I do every week for Dublin, and which bring in a certain number of people and all that stuff. But you kind of have to be aware that, all right, do I have time for this? I mean, sometimes you'd love to do an interview with somebody, a new band, but we try and stick those to podcast interviews here and there, but not every week because it's just really hard to do it all. So yeah, so I try to work smarter rather than work. But I think I do a lot of there's a lot of quantity as well. You know, there's a lot of work being generated by one person here, I think, and hopefully it's as much quality as I can muster and all that as well.
You know, is it a lot of pressure? Is that what's going on? Is there a deadlines? You know, effectively deadlines all the time.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I'm kind of used to the deadlines, and I probably work smarter now, and I work probably. Yeah, I think I just know what I'm doing most of the time, and you try and fit in what you can fit in, and recognizing what might chime with an audience sometimes is part of it, and being quick with news stories and stuff like that. There's things that can bring in thousands of people to read, but might only take you a certain amount of time. I think I have a workflow every day that's like, okay, so say if there's a gig announcement, and you try and not to try and be the first person to do it because you can't always do that, but like try and be prompt and get it up quickly, have good SEO built into it, posted it on the social media platforms, Instagram stuff, Instagram stories, all that stuff. And that's part of the process every day for anything that I write about. And sometimes they land and sometimes they don't. And sometimes they get extra eyeballs in, sometimes they don't. So it's kind of, sometimes it's trial and error.
Is that automated?
No, nothing's automated. No, I mean, I don't think automation is good for those things. I think I think people can tell when it's things are automatically posted to social media. So I try to avoid that, but I have a good process in terms of making sure it works. Like I said, it's the workflow that I've been doing a long time. It is, but it is a big part of the job now, just promoting your work. And unfortunately, you're down to whatever the social media platforms will allow you, whatever kind of reach they give you in terms of algorithm and all that stuff. So
Which changes all the time anyway.
yeah, and now they're like, well, obviously for a while now they've been wanting more video and all that stuff, and then like that's hard to do, and that's like I joined TikTok and I had a look at it and I was kind of going, what can I do with this? And I posted one video about one of the artists I wrote about. Actually, must have a look and see where it's doing now, but yeah, like I enjoy doing that, but it's also like I couldn't do that every day. I made a video version of what I'd already done. Now I had 70,000 views on TikTok, and I don't have many followers on TikTok, but it's its own world as well, and that's where the young people are as well. So, but you kind of have to go. I want people to visit the website, so it is tough to try and manage that. But like it's about capacity. Like how much time can you devote to making a video? And maybe ultimately that's where it could go. You could make a video on TikTok or 3 or 4 videos on TikTok about new artists every week, and that could be part of your workflow. But for the moment, I've put that on pause. I don't have time for it, and it's really about the measure is always like, are there enough people visiting the website to justify the advertising? Which I don't book generally through Google formats. I let it has to be direct ad sales because I want people to come direct, because it's Nialler9 is a music website, and that's where you can get the mainly Irish-based music fans. And if you are trying to reach those kind of people, that's where advertisers should be, as opposed to letting other networks programmatically decide where their ads should be. That is tough as well. That's all part of it. Sometimes people that have there's people that probably have never advertised with me, but that's fine. As of right now, like it's been going for long enough that I could make a living out of it. So I never take it for granted. Could change any moment. Who knows? In a year or two, I could have to completely change tack and give up the website stuff and think about some other way of making money. But as it is now, it does make a living for me.
With regard to new bands and the recording scene seems to me to have gone very amateur. And, that's not a criticism, that's just an observation. Would you concur with that, or...?
Do you mean by less studios?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, technology has enabled people to do what they want, and a lot of the times, I think when someone like myself has been doing it long enough, you kind of see what you would have maybe valued as a 20-year-old, you don't value as much anymore. It's kind of like the lo-fi stuff, and like seeing, there's only so much of that you really can enjoy sometimes. It's like, it's cool. But that's kind of part of it, isn't it? It's like you hopefully isn't the most defining thing about somebody's music, is that it's like, it sounds scratchy and it sounds full of distortion. That can be a technique, but like, I think most people are making music which, the production and the quality of it is really top notch compared to what people used to do. I think it can be very exciting still. I think music still excites me, and that's ultimately what keeps me going back, because if it wasn't, then I wouldn't be doing it.
You've been at it 18 years or whatever. Have you seen the Irish music scene develop in 18 years in 18 different ways?
Yeah, I think when I started, it was really like that wheel of the singer-songwriter scene was the main thing that was happening. Like, really. And then
yeah, that's true.
a lot of rock bands, and there was like Richter Collective and all the kind of heavy stuff that was happening. But now I think the only thing, I think we could lament the lack of scenes for sure, in terms of that is harder. I don't think it's easy to recognize like specific scenes or specific genres that people could tap into readily. I mean, obviously dance music and electronic music is so much bigger than it ever was now, and that's basically the de facto youth culture, as opposed to where it was new like guitar bands. And so that changes things as well, and that changes how people interact in the city, and the kind of events that they're going to and all that kind of stuff. But I think even younger people now are much more open minded in terms of what they're interested in and what they'll go to, and so I guess it's a double edged sword because there used to be people who are only into one thing, and now people are into loads of different things. But maybe it's harder to identify if you're like a trend a spotter. You know what I mean? Like trying to identify what is happening. I guess you can say, like, I mean, perennially guitars never really go away. And guitar music, alternative rock music. Obviously, there's been loads of acts who've come out of Ireland in the last 4 or 5 years, like Fontaines and Gilliband and Murder Capital and New Dad and Just Mustard. All of those have done really well. Obviously, now there's a trad kind of folk revival and a new version of all that now with the Mary Wallopers and Ishbini Naharan and John Francis Flynn and people like that doing really interesting things. There's jazz. There's a lot of jazz players coming out. A lot of young people coming out who are really good jazz players, first and foremost, and that's changing the music that is being made. Like the kind of stuff that people used to sample for hip hop is now the kind of stuff that bands can just play more readily and be
Right.
sampled by Irish acts. When like we look at Kojak's most recent stuff, there's a lot of like live band, like jazzy hip hop band stuff on it. So there's a lot of that. There really is. I mean, I think BIM has a lot to do with it. People who are
Okay.
coming out of that school who are also, first of all, much more savvy than anyone ever was before. They have a level of knowledge about the industry and about music that was pretty hard to see represented before that. And they're having influence in different ways. There's certainly a lot more. What seems to me is a lot more session musicians and people who were familiar with the terms of, say, being a producer of the band or the executive producer of a band, having the vision to put a band together for somebody else or for special types of shows. There's more people who do that kind of special skill stuff as well. So it has got more professional. We still probably, like, I mean, there's not a lot of labels really coming out of Ireland, but like it is hard to also start a label. I Would you start a label if you had a choice now, unless you had a load of money that you were happy to
Just burn.
potentially lose? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then if you actually, even the price of vinyl now in the last year has gone up, and obviously the pressing plant and all that kind of stuff. I was in, now this is a major laser example or major label example, but like the Chemical Brothers album, I was in Tower last weekend. It was €42 on vinyl. And then I went into the new HMV shop over the weekend just to have a look, and it was €52. I was like, why? But it's become more expensive to release vinyl as well, and it's become more expensive to tour. It's become more expensive to do anything, to rent a rehearsal space and to live in the city. So yeah, I think I still have there is a worry that like some of that's the momentum that's been built in the last few years is just going to disappear as more clubs close and places in which like people can gather. But I think we're seeing some positive examples. There's a place in Glasnevin by being opened soon by some dance electronic artists who are kind of building a community space with a patron funded space. So it's looking at those alternative models because we can't wait. You can't really wait for the government or to extend the licensing laws. When is that going to happen? We don't know. When should we not have a city art center or something like that where people can access a live venue space at a cheaper cost so that everything isn't tied to a massive rent or a basically a barrier to entry. I would like to see, still would love to see a space like the Oh Yeah Centre in Belfast where community can gather and not necessarily cost them so much money, become immediately a commercial concern. We still need spaces for the artists to grow, and that's all over, really, isn't it? It's not just Dublin, obviously. It's everywhere, and But yeah, I guess I mean, you see so many. I think it happens almost every week. Irish artists going moving to London, and artists who I thought were based here and now based in London, and you're like, oh, there's another one. Happens a lot. Happens way too much, because it's a small city. It seems to be that more people are finding success in those in places like that, or certainly finding a living in which to enable themselves to work on music somewhere that those people who are interested in pursuing career can actually continue to work on their music. Certainly seems like more people are able to put more of their time into music than they would be here because of the rent being so high. Like I said, I think the fact that there's more opportunities means for a lot of people it's worth the risk. There's a huge community over there as well. I mean, your friends move over, then you move over. Like Fontaines are based in London now. They're not based in Dublin anymore. And I think the only problem with that is what happens is the more people move away, the less industry that's built up here. So while you have bigger artists, say like somebody like Hosier, who has a lot of people who are Irish, who are working on his tour and stuff like that, that's really good to see. But when it comes down to more local industry, that's tougher when all of everybody who's slicing up the piece of the pie, whether it's the label or publishing or whatever it is, if they're not based here, they're based somewhere else, and they're probably with somebody like Hosier. It's a big major label. He has a big major publisher, not based in Ireland, so therefore the money isn't necessarily always coming back here where you'd like to think it was. Certainly, if somebody was more based here, but it is hard to maintain that. So, I think live. There's a lot of people who work in live who are based here as well, and who tour internationally, and the Irish have a good reputation worldwide. I think for as live music workers, but it's tough. It's hard to stay here and be based here. And like maybe Brexit has a more positive thing for us in terms of like, well, now we focus on people have always so much focus on, oh, we have to do UK stuff, but the UK gigs aren't actually worth much. You know what I mean? Like for a new band starting out, be lucky to get 100 quid for a gig. So why wouldn't you just move to Europe, move to Berlin, whatever? There's people who do that too, and who go and mainland Europe, the gigs are better paid, better venues, but it's about the network and the change of culture. If you can manage that, you can do it. Like people like James McMorrow have certainly done it in the Benelux countries where you can grow your audience but you get treated better in those countries than you do anywhere else.
Does he still live here?
He lives here, yeah, still lives here, but I know, like looking at his tour dates and stuff like that, and from talking to his manager and stuff, he clearly has people who really will pay for gigs, and you're seeing it more places like Amsterdam as well. A lot of Irish bands touring in places like that and doing well, so that's good. So we're a couple of weeks away from Ireland Music Week. Every year, 50 Irish bands play Ireland Music Week, the music conference and showcase. And I think what's happened around that has been really interesting because the organisers of Ireland Music Week, who are First Music Contact, Andrew the Dorgan and team, they build up the contacts and the network around that festival. They have Culture Ireland funding to bring people over, delegates over. They're bringing international festivals for like South by Southwest and The Great Escape and Eurosonic, places where you can really gear change your career. And I think with those coming now year on year, there's a real tangible outcome of all that, where bands are getting, if the bands are ready and they have a team around them and they have a booking agent, where sometimes like Skinner, for example, got his booking agent from Ireland Music Week 2 years ago. So there's an opportunity then to build a career out of that. And I think those opportunities of people coming here as well is really important. It's not to be underestimated. I think when you go to other countries and you see similar events, there are some for sure, but I think they do a really good job in terms of engaging with an international music community, and I think you see the results when at Eurosonic, Irish bands do really well every year, and that means with Eurosonic, it's live bookings that are the key factor. How we judge the success of those the acts, like how many slots they get booked at festivals because people have seen them at that festival. Generally, the bookers for Eurosonic come to Ireland Music Week, meet a lot of the bands, engage with a lot of the people who are working here and who are working in music here, and that's only a good thing. So I think that's really important. I think they've done a really good job in terms of developing that when it used to be hard working class heroes, and I think it's now it's much more industry focused, and I think it's more beneficial to the bands and anyone who engages with it, because it's like the conference stuff is great and really really good, and the speakers are really good. Now I'm going to be doing a part of it in a couple of weeks. That's why it's on my mind. I was thinking about it. I'm actually hosting a talk about TikTok. So that'll be something.
Yes,
hopefully
indeed.
I'll learn something about that as well.
Yeah. Is your audience Irish by definition?
Majorly, yeah, in terms of breakdown, yeah.
And is there any way to expand on that, or?
I'd probably double down on that instead of try to expand. I think better to be really good at one thing than try and be something to everybody. That's kind of how I've operated. I think there's media platforms there with a much bigger team and capacity than I have, and I think becoming the best known or being the best Irish one is something I probably double down on recently.
The only Irish one?
But yeah, but I mean, like, there's other websites. There's like District Magazine and Hot Press, obviously, and the last mixtape and stuff like that. But like, I think there's still an opportunity to be the first port of call for a lot of people who are certainly interested in the same kind of music that I am and all that stuff. And it's very different as well. Like, District would be more probably events and also like more hip hop focus and stuff like that. I don't strictly stick to one or the other, but I will cover a little bit of everything. So I think it's always just worth for me just considering how to manage that and how to what the focus should be, because it can change, and maybe down the line. I think it is hard. It's really hard to become. It's either like become focus more on social media stuff and become something that people see on their timelines a lot internationally, as opposed to, I think gigs are a big part of it. They're a big part of it. It's a big driver for the website. It's a big driver. I love, like, when I go, say I was in New York last year, and like, okay, what gigs are on, and finding, like, going to Brooklyn Vegan or whatever it is, and seeing what gigs are on there, and like what gigs are on in New York this week, and rather than just going to Ticketmaster or whatever, just seeing. I think that's a really positive thing to see, and I think is an independent site curating a list of gigs or music with a local angle, but not purely a local angle. Like, the website, it's important for me that the website is not just Irish music either, because I don't want the music I write about to exist in a vacuum. So, because that's not how people operate. Like, people who listen to music, who are mad music fans like me, don't spend all their time just listening to Irish music. They listen to whatever grabs their ear, and I think that's the way it should be. So I think trying to find a balance, strike the balance between international and local, and trying to have them both on an even keel, where it's like, okay, well, I feature this because I really like it, but I think it's as good as this international stuff. And then I also have the Irish tracks of the week. These days, that's like an iceberg, right? It's like seeing the tip of an iceberg. The rest of it, all the stuff below it, is the hours I spent listening to bands that or music that I wasn't really into, or music that didn't do anything for me. But to get to that point where it's like, well, here's a playlist of 20 songs that I'm considering for this week. I wonder, is there anything I can, like, take from this? Should I pick 10? Can I pick 12 tracks? Will I pick a mix of different things? How will I work it so that this makes the most sense every week, but also how's that stack up in terms of the international music I like? I think it's important that all of that stuff happens not in isolation from each other. So I think that's important.
Right.
And I think if you do feature Irish music, the important thing is to, not just feature it because it's Irish. Feature it because you think it's good. There's less outlets for music in most mainstream media. So if you're reliant on that for your work, and coverage, then you're going to be sorely lacking. And if you're looking for opportunities, it's tough out there. It's really tough. Sure, I used to have a show on radio as well, and that's gone. So these things that we used to have, if you're just solely reliant on them.
What station was that?
TXFM, run by Today FM, essentially. This is Communicore. So that wasn't able to last either. Alternative independent music or alternative music in a radio sphere, in just a Dublin with a Dublin license, didn't make enough money to stick around. The tools are out there for you to become an independent person, who, whether independent journalist or independent Substack writer or columnist or whatever it is you want to do. Like if enough people are interested, you can do it, I think. And I think if anything, there's a lot more like niche interests than there ever were, in terms of, say, there's people who are into a certain video game and they will pay money to be part of a community who only talk about that video game. Or like, it's the same as music as well. Like the people who are supporting me month on month on Patreon are the same people who are just really engaged in music and want to talk to people about music and want to know what's going on. And or like, I'm thinking about Second Captains, for example, the really good example of an Irish independent publication who have been doing it on their own after being on mainstream media, and still do every now and again. They had an RT show over the summer, but like their core thing is independent sports journalism and independent football journalism mainly. So same with podcasters. Like there's, look at Blind Boy, people like that. There is opportunities to do this as a make it your living if you're good at it. I think the podcast itself doesn't make a huge amount of money, but I think it is an important part of the overall picture, weekly picture that I have, and because it gives you that personal engagement with people. Like the people talk about the parasocial relationship that people have with podcasts and influencers or people that they follow. It kind of feeds into that, doesn't it? It's like people like listening to people they don't really know. They get to know them over a podcast, and then they're like, oh yeah, I really like that podcast. And you dip in every week. You don't know them personally, but that's part of it as well as talking about the music stuff. It's like getting to know these people a little bit. So yeah, I think it's really important. And I think it's a really nice, it's a way of talking about music that isn't as formal probably as the website. And I like that. I think it can allow for illuminating conversations to happen that are much more casual and more reflective of real life. And certainly if you're talking about albums as well, when there's a big album to discuss, it makes it more interesting to have a discussion about those things than just a simple review from one person. So I think it's really important. I think I really like that aspect of it, the discussion aspect of it, and bringing people in for different discussions about different niche topics and stuff like that. So I love it. I think it's really important to me to do it because it does feel like a deeper connection. Also, you get to talk to somebody every week directly, especially as myself who works on my own most of the time. You're like, okay, grand, yeah, it's nice to have somebody to actually vibe off in terms of music every week.
So that's Niall Byrne's way to do it. Many thanks to Niall for taking the time to chat. Please visit www.geniusmove.ie to find out about audio courses to suit you. Thanks for listening.